Welcome to C2 Biz Growth Iron Sharpens Iron podcast, where CEOs and entrepreneurs share how they are overcoming business growth and sustainability challenges.
Hello, I'm your host, John Hale III, and today we are excited to have Maria Thompson join us as our guest today. We're honored to have you. Welcome, Maria, to the show.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate you inviting me. This is going to be fun.
Yes, it is. We're looking forward to the conversation. So a little bit of background. Maria is a venture partner, and she's on the board of directors of Rico International Group, and she's also the former president and CEO of TJ Technologies, Inc., an alternative energy company founded in 1991 with her husband, Dr. Levi Thompson. And while growing the company's revenue, the company was acquired by A123 Systems in 2006. And she helped secure approximately $400 million of grants and contracts that helped to propel to a successful listing of the company. In addition, Maria has served on numerous boards of directors and nonprofits related to energy, technology, university boards. And again, we're excited to have you join us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the first question we wanted to ask is as we kick off our conversation is, Maria, if you could just share with us how you're showing up today, meaning that you're a successful former CEO, venture partner as well. So could you share with us an experience or two from your early career or your childhood that really shaped who we see today?
I think I have an unusual background for someone who co-founded and was CEO of a tech company. My undergraduate degree was in fine arts, and I had a Bachelor of Fine Arts from the University of Michigan in Industrial and Graphic Design. And I think, but I also have an MBA. So most people look at the MBA as the reason why you'd be successful at business. But I actually found that the innovation and the creative process that I learned in art school was really critical to running a small company, because when you have a small company, you don't have the resources that a large company has. And, when the door closes, because you get told no a lot as an entrepreneur, and you have to find creative solutions, creative ways around problems that come up, and particularly with limited resources. And so we were creating technologies for markets that didn't exist yet. So the innovative process was really critical in helping to shape the company, helping our scientists and engineers, focus on what the next best thing was, and helping everybody achieve things. I mean, the creative process was not just coming up with new materials, but also coming up with processes, coming up with marketing strategies, finding ways to get funding when venture capital wouldn't fund us. So that's something that most people don't really realize, but it was really critical to our success. And focusing on the team too. I think it's, I'm a Michigan fan, and they say the team. That's the same way it is for entrepreneurs with the folks that you're working with. You want everybody to feel special. They're all bringing something to the table. And I think as entrepreneurs, if you hire people, the smartest people you can find, and give them reign to create, you're going to be much more successful. And that's what we try to do with our culture.
Okay, fantastic. And TJ Technologies, what was the vision when you started the company, and what challenges were you trying to solve?
Well, when we first started the company, we knew we wanted to do something technical and from an engineering standpoint. So it was myself, Levi, and then we had a third founder, Dr. Mike Wixom. So we were looking at initially ultra hard coatings. And we novated a contract from another company that was going out of business. Levi and Mike had worked together at KMS Fusion, and they had known each other in graduate school. So we kind of formed the company to come up with new technologies. We weren't sure where the success was going to come from. So we started out with, like I said, a contract from the Army for ultra hard coatings. And then we went into supercapacitors, otherwise known as ultracapacitors. We had a large contract with Lockheed Martin and a lot of government contracts for that. But everybody kept saying what they really wanted was a battery. They didn't say that in so many words, but they wanted our ultracapacitor to have a lot of energy density, and ultracapacitors are great for power density, but they only have very, very little energy density. So we started getting into battery research. Levi had done a sabbatical out at in California at Berkeley, and he, met some battery people, and he got interested in the technologies, and we, focused on some battery anode and cathode materials, and as well as fuel cell materials. But the success really came from the battery materials.
Okay. Fantastic. And so you had mentioned earlier this the challenge of as you're getting starting approaching venture capital to raise funds. Can you talk to us about really just the grinding through that to people saying no, and what were some of the creative strategies you used to actually secure the funding that you needed?
Well, we started there back in 1991. Let's start with there wasn't very much venture capital in Michigan. I mean, that has changed a lot since then. But there wasn't much venture capital, and venture capital tends to look at things like software that has a much faster return. I mean, and it doesn't require as much investment. We were developing materials, new materials. New materials development can take 15 to 20 years. So we're developing battery materials. In fact, our battery materials that we developed and patented are being used in electric vehicles today. We were one of the early developers of a lithium iron phosphate-based cathode material that's being used throughout the industry today. But we were one of the early developers of that. So we were a little bit ahead of our time in coming up with that. But the military wanted that technology. So we found, we didn't even try for venture capital at first because it wasn't anything to really go out for. So we worked with the Small Business Innovative Research Program. Some people call them SBIRs. Yeah. And they're competitive programs. So you have to write proposals and you get told no a lot. I mean, 1 in 10 proposals get funded. We got to be pretty good at it, and we maybe would get half of our proposals funded, but it's a lot of work. There are solicitations that come out every year, and we'd find something that focused on our technologies, and eventually you get to know some of the people who are looking for technologies. They get to know your work. If you do what you say you're going to do, I mean, as for an entrepreneur, that's critical. You have to, you have to perform. So we would always make sure we met our targets and we came in within budget, which was hard because the profit margin on those contracts are very, very low. So it was a lot of work, a lot of rejection. I remember early on trying to get a loan from a bank, a line of credit. Levi and I, when we started the company, we kept our day jobs. Levi always kept his day. He was always, a professor at Michigan. But I was working at IBM when we started the company, and we'd work evenings and weekends. And then when I became pregnant with our oldest daughter, IBM would give you a 3-year leave of absence. So I wasn't sure if the company was going to take off. But we took the 3-year leave of absence, and the company did take off, so I never went back to IBM. But, you continue working evenings and weekends and all the time. When you're an entrepreneur, you're working all the time. So, the company began to grow, and then eventually we needed a line of credit. So we had an account with the bank, but I knew when the young lady flounced in that we weren't going to get a line of credit from her. I mean, I could just tell from the attitude.
Right.
She didn't know. First of all, she didn't know that we had an account with the bank, so she hadn't done her homework. And then, I remember one of my board members he was with me when we were meeting with her. And when I went out to copy something, I heard her say to him, "Did you help her write the business plan?" And I had just gotten finished talking about, I have an MBA, Levi has a PhD, the awards at IBM, all the stuff that we had done, but it just didn't click with her. So she asked me, one of the other questions was, what's the difference between our high-tech company and the pizza parlor down the street? So she was just unprofessional, and we weren't going to get a loan from her. Mm-hmm. So anyway, our board member happened to know the president of NBD in Detroit. So he called him, and we were able to get a line of credit. So I think one of the early lessons we learned is, I did put together a board of directors early on, of influential people who were just willing to help. They just wanted to give back. And that's why I like being on boards now, because our board members really helped us out. So I learned early on that having influential people in your circle can help cut through a lot of BS.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's really fantastic in terms of being a smaller company, having that sphere of influence of people around you that are on your board. Now, when we fast forward, the company's growing, it's taking off. Your role as president CEO then is helping to grow and scale the company as well?
And finding money. Yes. I would go to DC, and I learned how to get a plus ups and I learned how to market the technology and understand. I came from IBM, and IBM was a great training ground for entrepreneurs. There's a lot of ex-IBMers who are entrepreneurs because they really focused on process. And I was in marketing, so marketing and sales and client relationships, all those skills were critical for running your own company. And of course, when you first start the company, there were 3 of us in an office with, 1 or 2 computers when we first started. We rented lab space from another company that we knew, another person who had worked at KMS who started a company. And also they were willing to share what they knew with us. I mean, Ann Arbor is a great place. It's still a great place for starting a company because there's so many entrepreneurs. And unlike other environments where people don't share, you can pick up the phone and basically call anybody and they'll talk to you and help you. I mean, it's the Midwest attitude. I think Detroit is like that too. I've been involved with Black Tech Saturdays, and everybody's willing to share information of how to be successful. So I think the whole ecosystem in our area is something that is helping to drive the entrepreneurial engine. That's really taking Detroit forward. And, it's been around in Ann Arbor for a long time, but now it's really taking off in Detroit too.
That's fantastic. It's great to hear. Now, if we can fast forward, the company is growing. You'd mentioned you were purchased by A123 Systems, I believe in 2006. Can you tell us how that transaction happened? Just as an entrepreneur, so other people can learn, were you ready for an exit? Or how did this feel like the right way to exit?
Well, we had planned when we started the company, and when I talk to entrepreneurs, I always ask them what your exit strategy is. And our exit strategy was to be acquired at some point.
Okay.
Someone had told me early on that the best time to be acquired is when you don't need to be acquired. So it's a process we started early. We had lots of contracts. We didn't need any money. But I could see in the industry that there were a lot of people interested in alternative energy technologies. So we had been working with some large companies, and I'm going to backtrack a little bit to just some of the things that we were doing to build the company. Because you have to get some visibility. And the other thing I talk to entrepreneurs about is, reducing risk. Because it was one thing when I would come into a company and say, I'm from IBM. It comes with it a certain gravitas and a set of expectations and a set of security. When you come into a company and you say, I'm from TJ Technologies, you get TJ who? They don't know you. They don't know your company.
Right.
And the level of risk is really high when people are working with a small company. So understanding that we had been building and knowing we wanted to be acquired, we had started, from the very beginning, really setting things up. It took 20 years to develop, technologies that were worthwhile, but we had developed relationships with large companies. We couldn't get any attention from the big 3, but we did get attention from automotive companies from overseas who would come and say, wow, we thought you were a 300-person company based on your portfolio, and there was only 30 of us.
Right. So you're really fighting above your weight, so to speak.
Right. And we were, but we didn't know what we did. We didn't know we couldn't do things. We were developing stuff. One of my consultants came and he said that the Japanese had been looking at that lithium iron phosphate based technology, but they didn't think they couldn't get it to work. We didn't know any better, and we got it to work, and we patented it. We were the first ones, but we were one of the key developers. A123 was also a developer of the lithium iron phosphate based cathodes, but ours was easier to produce, and it worked better. So they ended up commercializing ours. But getting back to getting set up for the to get acquired, we had a board of directors. We had a relationship with Lockheed Martin. And I like to tell, there are different turning points in a company. We had several large advanced technology program grants. And the first time I was trying to get it, I was competing against companies in other states which were able to get state funding to help booster their proposal. Michigan didn't have a program. So one of the things I tell entrepreneurs is, to think about what you need and to go ask for it and be persistent till you get it. So I went to the MEDC. I said, hey, I'm competing for like a $2.5–3 million contract, but I'm competing against companies in other states whose states are providing follow-on funding for them. Can you do something for us? So, we went back and forth. And at that time, Mike Michael Finney was the president of MEDC. So we knew him from some other things. And so he knew us. So he had some faith in us and he developed a program for us. And we were able to go and win 2 ATP grants. Later on, they developed that program for all entrepreneurs in the state who were going after these large federal contracts. So sometimes you can do something that benefits your company, but it benefits other companies as well. Fast forward, a few years and I was asked to give a speech at Clark Atlanta about my ATP grant. And lo and behold, it was something that, I almost didn't do because, you're busy, you got your head down, you're trying to, keep making payroll and getting new contracts. I said, okay, well, I'll go do it. And it was a good thing I did because the director of NIST was sitting in the audience and he heard me speak and he was looking for entrepreneurs to be on his board. So I got on the board of the Advanced Technology Program. So I'm sitting next to the Chief Technology Officer of General Electric, the Chief Technology Officer of In-Q-Tel, which was the venture capital arm of the CIA, and a bunch of other high-level people and a couple other small entrepreneurs like myself. But had I not spoken at that conference, that opportunity would have come. So that led to other opportunities. One day, I was home late at night and somebody calls me and said, yeah, we saw you speak and I know you're on the ATP board. Would you like to be a green gazelle? I'm just like, what's a green gazelle and what do I have to do? And he said, well, we're just looking at, it's basically we're pulling together a bunch of alternative energy companies and we're not doing anything yet, but it's going to be something someday. So I said, okay. So nothing really happened with it other than I was registered as a green gazelle. And then about a year later, someone calls me and said, hey, do you want to go testify for the 50th anniversary of the SBA? So I said, well, testify sounds like a scary word to me. What does that even mean? And they said, oh, you just come and you talk about your company. So the first thing I did, I called somebody in Ann Arbor and said, who had testified before. I said, can you tell me your experience? What am I supposed to do? They said, well, you have 2 minutes to speak and they cut you off at 2 minutes and they're walking in and out. So don't be boring and don't read it. So I said, okay. So I memorized my speech and what they said was right. People are walking in and out during a testimony, but I was done on time and I was not boring. And then that led to us getting introduced to the congressional people and getting these plus ups and working with the department to get some money. So that's how I was able to raise money for battery factories in the United States, because initially those battery factories were going to be in Southeast Asia. So I was able to, because of those relationships I met out of this random opportunity that came out of nowhere, over years, you develop those relationships with staffers and I even got invited to the Armed Services Committee to talk about batteries and to give a little presentation about, different types of batteries for electric vehicles. But those led to huge opportunities to build battery factories in the United States that would have been in Asia had we not done the work. So, and then I'm building up to getting acquired. We were working, all this stuff led to interest. We were approached by the MEDC to be like an ambassador for the state of Michigan to show the world that Michigan is more than just automotive companies. They have entrepreneurs. So they said, do you want to be on these, the upper hand commercials? So I'm just like, sure, I guess. So, they show up and they made our office kind of camera ready, and we had most of our employees be in the commercial. I was on there for a nanosecond, but that was shown all over the world. I was getting calls from all over the world. And then that visibility, it's amazing when people see your company on TV, how much that does for your credibility. So that led to some larger companies being interested in us. And a couple of them were talking about acquisition. But with some of these very large companies, they make you go through a lot of hoops, and you jump through the hoop, and then they give you another hoop and you jump through the hoop. And with one company said, well, that was just the pre-hoops before we do, something. And then I was mistakenly copied on an email that I shouldn't have been copied on, where they're talking about how they would think they would be able to get me for a lot less money get our company for a lot less money than it was worth. So I'm just like, okay, I see where this is going. So you're never going to get our company. I'm not, we're just done talking. So at that point, one of our board members, and then to how I got this board member was another interesting story. I was we were looking for interns, summer interns at Michigan's business school. And he was on the dais sitting next to me. And he said to the interns, because he was a venture capitalist, he said, "Hey, if anybody wants to know more about venture capital, just let me know and I'll go to lunch." So afterwards I said, I know I'm not a student, but I'd like to learn more about venture capital. Can we go to lunch? So we went to lunch. He ended up being on my board, and he helped me negotiate a good deal for a investment banker when it came time to being acquired. So picking the right investment banker was critical because we had looked at a couple firms. Some of them wanted a monthly retainer, and I would have run out of money by the time a deal was struck. It took over a year and a half really to consummate a deal, because when you're getting acquired, the acquirer, there's lots of reasons to say no, fewer reasons to say yes. So he helped me find a firm that specialized in battery companies, and did a deal. We did a deal where they would take a percentage if they won, if they got us the deal. So that worked out beautifully. And so we had set the stage for us being acquired by, we had lots of contracts, successful contracts. We didn't need any money. We had some visibility in the marketplace through the public speaking, through these, the work with the state of Michigan and the MEDC. And then we had the right venture firm, and I had the board who helped me set up the terms of the agreement. Now, when you're getting acquired, what's happening is you're doing two full-time jobs. You are making sure the company is growing like this, and you are doing all the due diligence with different companies that are interested in buying you, which is another full-time job. I think with our venture, the investment banker and our lawyer, I think I've talked to them every single day for a year, on different strategies with different companies. And we ended up working with A123 Systems because they were small and they were hungry. Some of these larger companies, I was worried that they would put us on a shelf. And some companies do that. They'll buy a technology to keep you from competing with them. So A123 had a similar technology. We used to argue about which one was better. Ours was better. And they already had manufacturing plants.
Of course,
in Asia.
that's why they wanted to buy you. If it wasn't, they didn't want, if theirs was better, they wouldn't approach you.
Right. So anyway, they'll probably still argue to that to this day, but they ended up using our technology. But so they, it was interesting. It was an all-male management team, so they didn't quite know what to do with me. When they met me, they said, "Wow, you're really lucky to have been so successful with a fine arts background." I said, "Yeah, it takes a lot of hard work to be consistently lucky." So anyway, so it was interesting. The cultures were different. One of the ground rules that we had going in is that the team was be protected, our employees. We didn't want anybody fired. And we set it up so that they needed us. They needed our team because we were doing the government contracts. They had commercial contracts. So ours was almost like a separate entity. So when we were acquired, everybody had stock options for one. I had one of the things that we set up when we started the company was stock options for our employees. So when we acquired, everybody made money. And when when A123 went public, everybody in my company made money because they all had stock options. And I think, and the A123 team had stock options as well.
Maria, can I ask you a question about that?
Sure.
Sure, about that way to just, I think a lot of listeners could learn from a CEO perspective of that investment in the team, and not just saying that, but making that really tangible, of having those options from the beginning and making sure that, because clearly the team's going to realize there's diligence going on where all these, companies ask for this information, but that they're going to be part of the ongoing success story.
Well, and then there's two schools of thought on that. Some people, when they get acquired, don't tell anybody anything until it's a done deal. We were a small company, and it's very hard to hide things in a small company. So I didn't want the rumor mill to start because they could see, people coming in, and I wanted to own the narrative. So I was up front. We're getting acquired, and this is the ground rules. Everybody's going to keep their job. I had two people who actually were the most two people who are pretty valuable who really were scared that they were going to get fired once I wasn't in charge, so to speak. So I wrote them a letter. I said, okay, I will pay years of your salary if you get fired in the first year, because I was that confident it wasn't going to happen. So they were fine with that. So it was interesting how people deal with fear. And it's interesting, the stock options, they had them for a while, but a lot of people don't understand what stock options mean. So I spent a lot of time educating them of the value. But the thing is, until you have a liquidity event, they're not going anywhere, right? So for an employee, a lot of them may not have ever thought they'd be valuable because it took a long time, to build to the point where we become acquired. The ones who stayed and invested their time, we invested in their development, they made good money. But it could have happened where we were never acquired. So stock options are a risk.
Right. Yes, they are. For sure. Well, thank you for sharing that background. That's really incredible. And then up to the IPO, you guys were still engaged and still involved, correct?
Oh yeah, in fact, one of the ground rules was that I had to stay on as president of TJ Technologies, because we were TJ Technologies. Then it took a while to us to be totally absorbed into A123. So I stayed on until just after my lockup was done, after we went public. And then the other thing you learn as an entrepreneur, that after, you go public, it's time to leave. It's time to, we took the risk growing the company, but now I wasn't in charge anymore. So I wasn't making the major, huge decisions. So once my lockup was done, I got out of there. I should have sold all of my stock, but I sold a good portion of it, enough to be comfortable. But knowing what I know now, I would have sold all my stock, because, the CEO took some things in a different direction, which wasn't necessarily where I would have taken it.
Right. No, thank you for sharing that. And just from a venture capital standpoint, given some of the work that you're doing now and what you've learned, I wanted to ask a couple of questions. One of which you touched on a little bit, that according to the Angel Capital Group, that trade association, they had mentioned that it's more likely for high schoolers to play in the NFL than it's for venture capital firms to actually get capital from a venture capital firm. It's like under 1%. And based on your experience, what can CEOs or leadership of venture capital firms do to better position themselves to receive capital from a venture capital fund?
It is hard to get venture capital fund. You have to be in the right industry. You have to have you have to be growing very quickly. You have to be able to demonstrate that your technology is game changing and become a market leader. So when you look at those, and you have to have a great team, because venture capitalists invest in teams. So what typically happens is they'll come, if you get a meeting, that's great. There's in Michigan, there's several opportunities to get in front of venture capitalists. On Demo Day, Chris Rizik, he's done more for venture capital in Michigan than anybody in terms of bringing in firms and expanding opportunity. So he has two events, one in the fall, one in the spring, where small companies can actually apply to get in front of a whole bunch of different venture capitalist firms. And they help them with a pitch deck, and getting help with a pitch deck is really important. And understanding that too, you can't get discouraged when you get told no, because you're going to get told no, particularly the first time or out of the chute. Because what happens is we'll meet with a firm, and then you come back 6 months later and see if they've done what they said they were going to do in that amount of time. So, it's not like one meeting and you get funded. Develop a relationship over time, because they have to get to know you. You have market risk, you have product risk, you have technology risk, and you have team risk. So you have to show that you have an experienced team that can solve problems and can pivot, because what you think is going to happen, you don't know what you don't know until you get into it, and you have to be able to pivot to be successful.
Okay. No, thank you for sharing that. In the National Venture Capital Trade Association, in the 2025 yearbook, they at the end of in the 25 yearbook, the end of 24, they estimate there's about $307 billion of VC dry powder. That's meaning money that's sitting on the sideline and waiting to invest. I just want to get your perception of, do you feel that is a problem for CEOs, or is that an opportunity?
Well, I used to try to turn problems into opportunities.
Okay.
If I was a CEO looking for venture capital, you have to see what their funding mechanism is. You have to see what they're funding. You can't, we would get, I would get emails from people asking me to look at their pitch deck, and the pitch deck wasn't even in the right, technology group that we fund as a venture capital firm. So you have to go look at their websites, see what types of companies that they fund, and then pitch your deal to the right firm. But understanding that you'll likely be told no. And what we were doing, that's why we did SIBRs, and, we found other mechanisms of funding. And we self-funded as well, as we invest back into the business.
Right, right. No, thank you for sharing that, so entrepreneurs understand that, particularly your experience with the state of Michigan that did not have a program that even existed, that just competition other states had it, but actually being that proactive and creative and just going to those sources to be able to say, hey, this is a program you should consider. And by the way, you should fund us because you want us to succeed in your state.
Exactly, right. You have to
Right.
be very bold. I mean,
Right. I mean, you actually
we
help
had
create,
opportunities.
right, for yourself and a whole fund to help other companies that didn't even exist.
That's how we got funding for the initial battery factories. We got some funding from the Department for a demonstration one. And I remember I was trying to get a meeting with somebody at the MEDC. And I finally went up to the CEO at some other event. And I said, hey, these battery factories could be in Michigan and they could be in Southeast Asia. But if someone doesn't call me back, they're going to be in Southeast Asia. So on Monday, there was somebody in my office.
No, that's a great story of, no, that's a great story.
Yeah. And it was funny because it was at the auto show and I was presenting and the governor was there and I wasn't supposed to go and kind of beat up the guy, but I did anyway.
Right.
And I said, but it worked. And, we got the meeting and we were able to put together a program for to get funding to build battery factories in Michigan. The other interesting story with that was that we were able to get some money, and I got a call from somebody saying, "Hey, Dow is looking at getting that funding that you just got to build a battery factory." And little TJ Technologies can't compete with Dow. So I had to go back up to the state and talk about why we needed money for not just TJ Technologies, but for any battery company to compete, so that our money wouldn't get taken by a bigger firm.
Right. Hey, just Fortune.
A Goliath. Yeah, it was David versus Goliath. Yeah, we couldn't compete with that. So I remember going up and saying and explaining to people in the legislature why we need, multiple opportunities for battery companies. And then battery companies are in Michigan because of all that work.
Right.
And they're in the United States because of all that work. Otherwise, the whole industry, this was at the beginning of the large format batteries for electric vehicles. So there wasn't an install base yet here. And the whole supplier base you had to have manufacturing here to get the supplier base. If all that had been in Asia, if we hadn't had a foothold here, there would be no battery manufacturing in the United States for large format batteries. It would all be in Asia. So there were things that needed to happen that didn't happen with that because we needed more investment. And of course, now the investment's going with this new administration. They don't like electric vehicle batteries, but I've been around long enough to go that it's a cycle. I mean, they're up, they're down, they're up, they're down. But the world is going towards electric vehicles. Yes. So we will either be with the world or we will be behind the world.
Left behind. Right. And also, thank you for sharing for our audience benefit as well, just the calculated risk you took of just approaching a gentleman at the auto show, at a public event, and being really bold about, here's the business case and why it is in his interest and in the state's interest to actually help support you guys.
Well, one of the things I learned early on is you have to seize opportunity.
Yeah.
And it's worked out. I mean, they can say no, but a lot of times surprisingly, they'll say yes.
Right. Yeah, because people can sense the seriousness, conviction that you have, and it
worked out great for the MEDC because we opened those battery factories in Michigan, and they were right there when we were at the cutting ceremony. Basking in the success of all of our work. It was public-private partnership. Those battery factories, we took an empty factory, and then this is another funny story. It was an empty factory that we converted into a battery factory. And when we got the funding, and I was there, excited and happy. And then they came to me and she said, we'd like to have a press event tomorrow at your facility. Well, I had just been at that facility that morning. I had handed out a couple tickets to the event at Next Energy so some of the people could come. And the grass was like really high, and they were tearing up carpet because they were getting ready to do some demolition work. It was not camera ready for a press event. So she said that to me, and I knew that, but what is the answer when someone gives you a great opportunity? This is going to be a press event. The answer is always yes. So I was sitting there on my BlackBerry. I couldn't bask in any of that success because I was sitting there. I have 20 hours to make this plant camera ready. So I texted, I said, stop tearing up carpet, put it back down. And then one of the things I said, there was a Joe Bogelli who had a PR firm was sitting next to me, and I'd worked with her. She's the one who did the Upper Hand campaign. Said, if she can help me, if you'll pay for that, we'll do it. And she said, yes. So she helped me as well. So, I called the people in my office. I said, does anybody have a lawnmower? They came over and mowed the lawn. Our people, our technologists came over, mowed lawns. They put the carpet back down. Joe got a secretary I'd never seen before, some flowers, toilet paper in the bathrooms. We had a backdrop. I called some other folks to get some demonstration equipment there. We got a car, with some batteries. So we set up something for people to look at. We got chairs. Someone else I called, my office administrator, got food there. And then, I was on the phone like basically all night, so we made all that happen. And then like a half an hour before the event was about to begin, Joe looks at me and goes, have you ever had any media training? I said, no. So she gave me a quick course in media training. She said, hold on to that mic when you're talking, because if you give them up, they're going to turn it into a speech, and they'll never get off the stage. So, so basically we had a great event. It was on the news, and it announced our plant and the funding, and it was awesome. So, but it was 20 hours to put that thing together. And as we say to entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs do this all the time, the answer is always yes.
Yes.
And then you figure out how to make it happen.
Got you. Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Wanted to pivot a little bit to talk about corporate governance. And in terms of, if you could share with our audience from your perspective, I guess a couple different lenses you're going to look this through. So one, can you help us understand what CEOs desire from board directors of a mature company, RICO International Group, which you're on the board now, and others? What are CEOs looking for?
They're looking for strategic advice, basically. As someone who's run a company, gotten acquired, and I've seen, what works, what doesn't work. So typically corporate CEOs are looking for somebody, for people who are interested in getting on corporate boards. There's a couple things. They're looking for P&L experience, for one. So you got to be able to, understand balance sheets and profit and loss and what works and what doesn't. They're looking for experience, and they're looking for somebody they know. Typically, all of my board positions I've gotten through my network of people that I know. And the one thing I tell for people who are aspiring to be on boards is tell people that you want to be on a board, so that when they're in a board meeting and say, oh, we need somebody with this level of expertise or this type of expertise, they'll think of you. Because if you don't say it, they'll never know. Again, it's asking for what you want. So there's some headhunters that specialize in boards. I haven't really found that to be particularly successful in my case. Most of them have come through people I know who've seen my work. Rico, we were on the Women's Presidents Organization together, so she'd seen how I thought. But the people that I brought on my board were people who either I knew or knew somebody I knew, who came as a recommendation of somebody who I had worked with, saying, oh, this person has grown their company. They'd be great to have on your board. So a lot of it's through personal relationships. And even being on nonprofits, you start on nonprofits, you get a lot of board experience. Many of those other board members may be on corporate boards. And so if you don't let them know what you want to do and what your level of expertise is, that's a good way to network.
Okay. And would that be the same case? Would it be for CEOs who run smaller companies, like let's say TJ when it was smaller, or A123 pre-IPO? Are CEOs looking for similar type of background or experience from board directors? Or is it different?
Yeah, I mean, I was on the boards, even when I was president and CEO of TJ Technology. So, you're not going to be on some big board that pays you a ton of money when you come from a small company. You'll be at a smaller, small company CEOs tend to be in smaller other company boards. People who do the big boards typically have a different level of experience, line experience. So.
Gotcha. Okay. No, thank you for sharing that. And also wanted to ask you, is there anything else you think you would want to share for our audience of CEOs and emerging leaders, just about your experiences?
I think that, most CEOs know that persistence is like one of the key ingredients of being successful. I mean, if we all had $1 for every time we were told no, we wouldn't need to raise money.
Right.
So it
right. You can go off and retire, forget the company.
Right, exactly. So,
Right.
you get used to turning no's into yeses. And I think you learn to take being small and, like in my case, being a woman-run company in a
Mhm.
predominantly male high-tech world. You learn to
Right.
turn things into competitive advantages because,
Mhm.
I was typically the only woman, presenting sometimes at some of these conferences, but people would remember you. And so you learn and as a small company, sometimes you get underestimated. People assume you haven't done your homework. But if you have to work twice as hard to create your opportunity. And I think any entrepreneur who's successful knows how to create opportunities.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
and that's something that, as we talk to the next generation, the younger entrepreneurs, we can help them. Other entrepreneurs helped me. I mean, when I would call people and say, hey, like when we were looking for the advanced technology program grant, our first one, I called
Mhm.
other people who had won grants, and they were happy to tell me how they won it, what they did well, what they would have done differently. And what we used to do is before we had to present our work, because you're competing for tech, for these grants, I used to say, okay, which questions do we not want to be asked? And then we'd come up with a slide for that, you know.
Okay.
And that way we were really prepared, because when people would ask the hard questions, it wouldn't, get us flustered because we already had anticipated that
Right.
and then had an answer for that. I mean, one of my IBM managers who I've really looked up to, John Kennedy, he used to say, anticipate, then orchestrate. And I think that's a good way to kind of, when you're an entrepreneur and a CEO, you have to anticipate what can go right, what can go wrong, and
Right.
orchestrate things to make sure that you're prepared.
Thank you for sharing that. And the last question I had, Maria, was what are your superpowers, and can you share with us how you discovered them?
I think being optimistic, I think is a superpower. Looking for the good in people, being confident enough to hire people who I think are smarter than me. I would hire the smartest people I could find,
Mhm.
and a lot of people don't do that. I remember GE, there was a book that Jack Welch wrote that said A people hire A people, B people hire B people, and C people hire C people.
Mhm.
And I kind of found that to be true. And I think to be successful, you want to hire the most talented people that you can find, because everybody has different skill sets. And if you can bring them in, it's almost like an orchestra, where everybody's, firing at all cylinders and moving in the right direction, and everybody's motivated. I think that's being able to motivate people for a CEO and to recognize talent is a superpower, because you can't do it by yourself. It's the team, the team, the team.
Right. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Well, Maria, thank you very much for joining us and being part of the C2 Biz Growth podcast team and family. We really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed talking with you.
Okay, we would love to thank our audience for joining us today on the C2 Biz Growth Iron Sharpens Iron podcast, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the C2 Biz Growth Iron Sharpens Iron podcast. And check us out on social media, share, and subscribe.